Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us on yet another present day production live stream. If you've never seen us before and you have no idea who we are, my name is James and I am the resident tech wizard.
Hello, I'm Sam and I'm a songwriter, producer and many other things that cannot be mentioned.
And my name's Mark and I'm a fat, grumpy mastering engineer.
Oh, deluxe.
Who's sitting in a very short
You look
seat.
like you're here for a job interview.
Yeah, I am.
Please hire me.
Please hire me, I'm very good. I've got over 45 minutes experience.
Perfect. And on this evening's live stream, we have a very special guest. We have the wonderful Dave Lloyd.
Hello. Hi. So I got a little bit of an eye thing going on. Hi, I'm Dave.
Tears.
I'm a mixing engineer in Edinburgh. Run a studio that's well equipped by these guys. They sort of be out with some good speakers.
Absolutely.
Mummed up to the max.
I'm all mummed out.
All mummed out. That's good.
So, Dave, we've known Dave for quite a while. Dave was among one of our very first mum monitor customers back in very early 2023. I think maybe even you bought them at the end of 22. It was very early, one of the very first customers. And we've kept in touch very closely since. And Dave came down for a live stream 3-4 months ago, maybe a bit longer, to talk about mixing on the mums and all that kind of fun stuff. And we wanted him back. So here he is. He's come back. He's graced us down south in rainy, disgusting Epping.
I mean, I am from Scotland, to be fair.
Is it rainy in Grimsby?
Whatever it is here, it's worse.
Brilliant. So we're here to talk about a couple of things. We have had a first listen to the new Mum 10 MBs, which was quite a fun experience.
Blew my socks off.
Blew your socks off. And we're also talking about your studio, how you built it, what the whole kind of premise is, and kind of the whole community that you've built around it. Because I've been to Dave's studio because I delivered your speakers in Edinburgh last year, and it was a really cool vibe place. So we'll come to that very shortly.
Nice.
So talking about blowing your socks off.
Yes,
We had to listen to some of Dave's mixes earlier.
we did.
Didn't we? And your trajectory has always been upwards. But it's kind of gone like that, and then it's kind of taken a bit of an angle like that, and it's kind of... And everything you played us, whether it was Atmos or stereo, that's the first time for ages I've heard stereo and gone, okay, this is amazing. This is a very important live stream for anyone watching, because you will go back to this video in years to come when Dave is charging $2,500 a mix and we can't afford him for a live stream anymore and he'll be too busy. We'll have to go up to Edinburgh. I cried for starters with the piece recorded in the church, which was just astounding. But there's a thing that's really consistent with every single mix that we were talking about earlier, and there's this solid foundation of low end where you can hear every note, you can hear every transient of a kick drum. There's nothing artificial. There's no 7K boosted on the kick drum so as it stands out in a mix. It's just the bass drum is where it should be. The low end is really solid, but then as you go up through the mid range and into the treble, the things that really stood out for me was the amazing sense of clarity. You can hear every single thing in the mix, and it's perfectly balanced. Sounds it almost sounds like it hasn't been mixed, which I mean is a compliment. You can't. Oh yeah, I can hear an 1176. Quite often you can hear what someone's done to a mix. But what really blew me away is that, and especially in stereo, is just the sense of space you've given. No matter what genre it is, and there's some electronic stuff we've listened to, there's some acoustic stuff. Sorry about that.
Yeah, put you on the spot.
But
Yeah,
I really mean that. It's your mixes are. If you listen to every single song on any streaming service, your work would be in the top 10%.
Man, thank you. That obviously means like the world coming from you two, especially, and you, Sam. Sorry, Sam.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, honestly, I can't thank you enough. I will say that it definitely, getting the mums sort of sent me on that journey. It was getting the mums and also hearing some of your mixes when we first came down. I was dreadfully hungover when I was here, but it was the one thing that I did manage to retain in my brain was exactly what you're describing, the kind of sense of space, like everything having its own place in the mix, which was something that I realized I'd almost been instinctively going in the opposite direction, trying to glue everything into this one
thing.
Sort of one thing, yeah. But actually that's the opposite of what you should be trying to achieve in most mixes, I would say.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, I think almost everything, if not everything that we listen to today is stuff that I've mixed in Atmos and then muxed down to stereo.
Right.
And there's something about that workflow that seems to be making me behave a lot better when I'm mixing. Like I'm way less inclined to kind of overproduce and overmix every element. Because I can just place it somewhere.
Yeah.
And then when you actually fold it down, you realize you never needed to do all that.
Yeah,
you never needed to have 16 plugins on every...
Exactly. Yeah.
And so often as well, you know, when I like open if someone gives me a project and they're like, can you kind of fix the mix on this? And you notice there's just endless plugins, a lot of the time duplicates of the same plugin going down. And if you actually look at what's going on, a lot of the time it's just making it louder every single time. Yeah. But louder is more betterer in our minds.
Either that or the 15 plugins that follow the first one are just trying to undo what the first one fucked up. That's totally, quite often the case as well. So you get the compressor first, and then you got all the stuff that's trying to uncompress the compression and bring some dynamics and some life back. And it's like, just take the first one off. Yeah.
And then see with the vocals, I have to say, what I think one thing that I've really changed over the last year is unless it's something really natural, like classical or jazz, something like that, if it's a more pop orientated track, compressing the absolute shit out of the vocal seems to do wonders. And I can't like almost to a ludicrous extent, like where you think if someone was looking, I'd be embarrassed if someone was looking over my shoulder looking at what these needles are doing, kind of thing. But on vocals it just seems to work so well. I quite often compress the hell out of vocals. I think I remember hearing you say that. And I know the problem is like, what does the hell out of mean? But you know, like sometimes the needle is going to the end of the V. You know?
And I think because we're so used to hearing that as well, because that started back in the early days of vinyl. Everything had it. There was a dynamic range, and you had to be within it. So we're probably really used to hearing that as well. But what you've done with vocals, from what I heard today, is just. It doesn't sound over compressed. It sits in the track perfectly. It's not on top of it. It's in it, but it's clearly the lead instrument. And your use of space, reverbs, and delays, and what you've done with backing vocals to really support lead vocals as well. Just absolutely blown away today.
Thank you, man.
Amazing job.
I really do appreciate that.
Future superstar. Well, a superstar already, but
we had a good listen to the Mum 10 MBs.
We did,
and you had them sort of mounted pretty near field to the listening position. And what really struck me listening here compared to my studio at home is there were certain tracks where I've maybe layered quite a few drum samples or loops, and I could hear the sort of certain transients like phasing each other out, and in a really unpleasant way that was really bothering me, that I just couldn't hear at all at home, and I think a lot of this kind of stuff is because you could then follow on from that and say, well, if you can only hear it in a perfect room with perfect speakers, does it matter? But the thing is, I think it's the accumulation of all of these things that result in a good mix or a bad mix. So if you catch all of those little things, if you can use drum samples that complement each other really, really well, there's sometimes it's a general feeling you have to just how expansive and I guess transient and dynamic a mixed sound is related to things that you actually can't hear why it doesn't sound right on most systems. I think a huge part of it is your monitoring system, and that is ultimately the biggest thing that's changed for me.
We were talking about that in there, weren't we? We were listening to a mix, and I was saying I was working in a studio with a very, very sexy 3-letter system, shall we
JBL.
say? Maybe. And I said that I just needed to come here to check it because there was just like a small hum on the
Right.
speakers there, and
Yeah.
I kept saying to the engineer there, "Can you hear that? Can you hear that?" And no, I can't hear it at
Yeah,
all.
that's
And
deep.
it's just the clarity in there. It's like I just can't sign off on anything unless I've heard.
Well, you've got some like freakishly good ears. Like you were picking up on all kinds of. I'm really insensitive to a lot of things. Like the noise of like an air conditioner or something doesn't really bother me that much in the room. But I noticed, we were halfway through listening to a mix. It was really loud, and you're like, "Can you turn that off?" And then I turn it off, and then I'm standing behind you, and you're like, "Man, you're messing with my Phantom Center, dude. Can you like just leave the room?"
Sorry about that.
Get out. So let me just explain that. So he was too hot. That's why he wanted the air conditioning turned off. And the reason he wanted you to leave the room was because he'd farted again and had the egg problem. So that's his ears are rubbish.
So, just for the clarity of anyone who didn't see the last live stream that we had with you on, can you explain to the viewers what monitoring you're using, like a bit about your studio,
Yeah,
just
totally.
for some context?
Yeah, so I started. Well, I founded the studio with Jack Elliott, Fergus Cook, shout out. And we started out as a sort of traditional recording studio, stereo studio. We gradually accumulated a lot of gear. We had this sort of living room vibe, I guess, is what we were going through. Like you want to go, like almost like the feeling you get when you go to your mate's house who's got like a studio in the bedroom, but with good gear was kind of the vibe we were kind of going for at the time. So we had like nice warm lamps everywhere, and you're just gear everywhere. And I got really into outboard mixing. And then I think well, it was probably around the time I first discovered Atmos that I started thinking about quite a lot of the stuff in a different way. I realized, for example, that with the outboard I was using, it was honestly, I guess, more of a vanity project than it was about the sound of the thing. Like I wouldn't ever want to say that outboard is pointless or anything like that, but I used to use only hardware 1176s, and now I use only UAD 1176s.
Right.
And I can't hear any difference. If anything, I think my mixes are better now. And one advantage is I can use way more UADs, way more 1176s if I want to in digital, because you just put another plugin on. It remembers all your settings. Also, things like I realized halfway through an album that we were mixing at the start of the year that one of my 1176s had developed like a fault. So it had a bit of a distortion on the left channel of all the drums that I've done on that now. And that's something you just have to live with. And it's like, well, you don't actually need to work this way anymore. It's nice. There's something nice about it.
Exactly.
It's a workflow thing almost, isn't it? Using
Totally,
outboard gear. It's almost like the limitation.
But then you also end up with a situation of what you're going to keep like a book for every.
Yeah, your recall book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then there's a lot of overhead. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I guess my thinking kind of changed on that, and I gradually started to. Well, I wanted to move into Atmos, and that's quite expensive. So I started selling a lot of gear, sold most of the outboard, some synths, some other stuff, and then used that basically to pay you guys loads of money and buy lots of speakers. Although you cut me a good deal, and I really appreciate that.
No problem.
So you started off with the very early iteration of the Mum 8s with the Dayton Audio bass drivers.
That's right.
This was way back when.
Yeah, they're my rears now.
Yep.
And now I've got the Mum 8s with the Purify at the front.
Yep.
And I've got a Mum 6 in the centre, much to Mark's ire. You wanted me to get a Mum 8 for the centre speaker, which you were right about, by the way. But yeah, and then I got Mum 6s on the sides.
Don't tell him he's right about anything.
You'll never hear the end of it.
I told you. And then I've just got Genelecs in the ceiling.
Yeah.
Cool.
And was fortunate enough to be visited by Richard at Dolby, who did some wizardry.
He did his magic thing.
He did his magic thing, and it made the world of difference. It was unbelievable, and saved me a lot of money on a Trinov as well.
Amazing. And you're running a sub as well because you're doing Atmos?
Yeah, we've got a Kali sub, which, so Richard actually set up, so that does everything below, I think, 40 hertz.
Right.
So it's just tickling the sub.
Mm-hmm. So have you got all channels bass managed to
exactly,
your sub?
Yeah, even the left and right. Well, the heights are bass managed way higher than that, but I'm referring just to the left and right. So they've got everything below 40 hertz. which is actually really good for the way I like to mix, because as you have probably become aware now, I really like having a lot of that.
You like bass?
Super low end. Yeah. Really
Well,
like to
that's
feel
interesting, because the bass in your mixes is so consistent.
It is very consistent.
How?
Give us your secrets.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say, but part of the reason I like really being able to hear and feel that sub is so that I can hear it and therefore know how to treat it and make it sound.
But it's translating
consistent
really well to.
Yeah, but then the funny thing is that so we were listening earlier, and I was sort of trying to dial up the sub a little bit in the speakers, because I do prefer just a little bit more of that. I guess I grew up doing a lot of clubbing and DJing and stuff, and got very used to that feeling of
want that thumping bass.
Yeah, just in your body.
Yeah.
Thing,
which is fun.
You grew up
it's definitely
clubbing,
fun,
but it was kind of a bit of a different style of clubbing that you were doing, wasn't it?
That was club singing.
Yeah, it was seal clubbing, but you're not allowed to do that anymore.
There we go. So all of this new Atmos setup that you've had for a couple of months now is in your studio in Edinburgh. So give us a bit of context about the whole place, about what the setup is, because it was a pretty cool place when I came to visit, but you've been there right since the beginning of that whole community
more
studio,
or less, right? Yeah, so there's a guy called Dave Whitney who founded that business. It's called Music Base, and he used to be a producer in London, and I think he was very aware that there's a lot of those types of places in London where you have a kind of studio complex where you've maybe got like a bar and you've got a bunch of producers who have their own rooms, and it feels like a community. And there wasn't a lot of that in Edinburgh. Most of the studios were kind of dotted around separately. So he wanted to try and build a place where people like myself could come in and sort of rent a little corner, build something, and then lots of studios, lots of things going on.
Yep.
And it took a long time to get there, but that's very much where it's got to now. We've got there's about 5 different studios in the building, and we all work together. No one feels like they're in competition. You're all friends.
So it's a collaborative space.
Yeah, because I think the thing is, I think as a general rule, when you go to a recording studio, you're really wanting to work with a specific person rather than being like everyone's got, like most studios have half decent gear. You can get a good mix.
You can go anywhere for that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like Fortet posted on his latest album. Oh no, actually, you know what? This was years ago, so it was probably 3 albums ago or whatever. But he posted this photo saying, "This is the studio I made my latest album on." It was just a photo of a laptop and a desk.
Yeah,
absolutely nothing else. You know, you don't need a super fancy studio, but regardless, I think the main thing people are looking for is a specific person to work with. So
absolutely.
I don't think that you need that feeling of competition between studios. I think what you do is you just focus on your niche and you develop that, and then people will come to you if they want to sound like you. What were you going to say, sorry?
I was just going to say that I've only seen photos of your place on Instagram. I had no idea that it was in like a complex. It looks like sort of like a really cozy, comfy, almost like a living room type place.
Okay, right.
Not. I don't mean that in a way that it looks like it's in a house, but
it looks
the way
inviting and
looks
warm.
Very warm and like it looks like it's on its own purpose-built kind of place.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, it's funny. So when we started stepping into Atmos, I looked at a bunch of Atmos studios around the world and felt like I wanted to move. A lot of them had a sort of quite a clean, clinical look to them, and I actually quite liked it. And I kind of wanted to maybe move into that a little bit. And with us getting rid of some of our outboard gear, I thought maybe the kind of homely living room vibe wasn't working as well. So I tried to sort of move towards that. But then there's these amazing chaps in Edinburgh called Knockwood Studios, and they've just opened up a studio, and they've gone like the opposite direction, the way that we were going before, of making this really warm. They've got just like gear everywhere, and like I saw their place, and then I was like, I wish I was doing that now. You know, it's like you just want what you don't have, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then they came around, they really liked our place too. So it's just, you know, you have to choose something and sort of go in that direction, and that's what we tried to do. But I'm glad to hear that there's still some kind of homely.
Yeah, I saw. It must have been in one of your stories or something, but it was just like the view from, I think, the live room into the control room or something.
Yeah,
like that. It looked really nice. Yeah,
nice.
And there's like guitars on there, and
that's true. Yeah, there's still part of that is
didn't
also
look like really sort of like sleek and just like
part of that is frankly just also having a lack of space. We just don't really have anywhere to put a lot of our stuff, which is partly why I've been trying to downsize. But yeah, as I say, then I do kind of
Oh, it looks very spacious. It's the slow karma videos, aren't they? It looks pretty spacious from that. Maybe that's just the cameraman sort of getting in the nooks and crannies. I don't know. But, it looks quite spacious.
So the whole studio layout is underground, right?
Yeah.
Am I remembering that right?
Yep. The whole
it's underground.
It is all underground. And there's like an alleyway of studios, so it's all very centralized around.
Yeah, it runs all the way down the street.
And one of the things I think this is your studio. I remember this from. You've still got daylight.
Yeah.
Right? Am I remembering that right?
That's right, yeah.
Daylight. So the whole time I was there, I was like, how have we got daylight? We're like 30 foot under the ground, because it's quite a long way down, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. What is this thing you speak of?
Dave has fake light.
So,
which made a huge difference. It felt like we were on street level, didn't it? It didn't feel isolated or kind of you being tucked away underground or anything. And that made a big difference.
So I realized this. So I used to also repair electronics, and I would do that from the same room as the studio. So I was just in there all the time. And being in a basement with no sun in Scotland all the time does something weird to you, and not in a good way. So I actually found this video. There's a YouTube channel called DIY Perks.
Oh yes,
and it was his designs that I more or less copied. He basically he buys something called a cob LED from China, and they're like ultra bright. I think his one was 50,000 lumens. I went for 20,000 because 50,000 was a bit insane.
You get a suntan sitting in your studio.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then what he does is he buys a satellite dish and removes the repeater and puts the LED in its place.
Right.
And then he wraps the satellite dish with like a kind of chrome mirror wrap. And then what this does is it collimates...
Sorry, just quickly, your hand's blocking the mic for this magical thing.
Sorry,
there we go.
Yeah. And then what it does is it collimates the rays. So essentially it casts the light to infinity. So wherever you stand in the room, the shadows that you cast are the same size. Right. Whereas if you were to put a really bright bulb sort of right there in the room, you would cast a huge gloomy shadow. And that's one of the ways our eyes can tell the difference between natural light and artificial light.
That's so clever.
So
I've never even heard of that.
More sunny in your studio than it is in Scotland.
Yeah,
most of winter, it is.
Dave has harvested all of the sunlight.
Whenever it's sunny in Scotland, it's coming from Dave's studio.
It's the world's
it's a golden shaft of light coming from Dave's studio.
Yeah. I will say it's quite divisive. Some people absolutely hate it.
Really,
they just want it off.
What, sunshine or the light?
That light specifically. That's because it still doesn't feel good enough.
I suppose you have a lot of Scottish artists, don't you? So they're probably not used to it. Yeah. You know. Can you just make it dark?
No, I think you can still, if you know about it well, you can still tell it's not real light, and so I guess if you've got an ultra bright light sort of just battering you all the time, it's maybe not that. Exactly,
just like in here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good though. I'll have to find that video. I remember he did a video years ago, a similar thing with some light panels that he made, and he just went to the dump and got loads of flat screen TVs, and there's a very clever diffuser in there that if it was because they're made in such quantity, it's affordable, but if they weren't, it would be a really expensive thing. And he did something with sort of LED strip, and that diffused the light really well. Yeah,
he is the most fantastic nerd ever.
He's a very clever guy, isn't
unbelievable.
He?
He's built this desk that is like a whole computer.
Yeah, the whole PC in the desk.
It just looks like a desk, and there's like this little thing you push, and then it just opens up into
really cool.
whole computer setup. And you can close it, and it's just a normal desk. You'd never know. Bananas.
I want one.
Wife-proof.
Yeah.
So at the moment, one of the things we wanted to talk about on this live stream is the Mum 10s. So you've got Mum 8 Silks as your left and right at the moment, which are the base model Mum 8s. You spent a bit of time listening to the Mum 10 MBs. What was your initial thoughts on that? Because you'd never heard them before now. You'd heard the vertical 10s, which theoretically are the same. But did you find anything different when you first had a listen to the MBs? Yeah,
so I think the first thing I would say is, as you said, you basically don't need a sub at all. The low end is so deep, and there is so much headroom, and it's so tight because it's a sealed cabinet. And there's something about it not being separated into a different speaker as well that just makes it so much more there. You can just hear it exactly, and you can hear the sort of fine tuning of deep subnotes, which is just bananas.
Yeah.
And yeah, that, I mean, I already felt like I had a bit of that with the Mum, well, a lot of that with the Mum 8s, but the Mum 10s is just another level on that. With the Mum 8s, I still quite like having my sub, whereas with the 10s, I probably would give or take it. Yeah, very quickly get used to not having it. And then the other thing, but I think you said, obviously this is, because I'm working with Silk drivers, and the MBs have beryllium ones, and it does...
As the base model.
Yeah, and it does, I have to admit, make a very, very big difference.
Yeah, so we often get quite a few viewers and people emailing in saying, like, what are the differences between Silk and beryllium drivers? And we're often saying, like, there's more detail, you get better transient representation, you get deeper layering perception, so you can hear your reverbs and stuff like that. Is that something that you heard when you were listening? Could you pick out things that you might not have heard on your Mum 8s?
Yeah,
Silks?
so much so. I think I mentioned earlier, like the biggest thing that was really striking me is just how much I could hear phasing between different sounds. It was kind of driving me a bit crazy, to be honest. Just like, oh god, like I should have done this, should have done that. But that, I mean, that's just a good thing. That's just really useful to know. And again, it's one of those things where you might not hear that specifically on other systems, but what you will hear is the mix somehow just sounds better if you don't have those issues, which you can pick up on when you've got really good monitoring systems.
All those little increments build up, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, so talking of like increments building up, obviously acoustic treatment plays a big part in the sound of a speaker system. Now, you were commenting that our room essentially disappears when you're listening because it's a very dead room. Yours isn't so dead. Now, I can't remember all the details of your room, so you'll have to fill us in. But what's the thing with your room? How have you gone about treating that? Because you've got lots of kit in there as well, right?
Yeah, totally. So, you know, it's a game of compromises, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We have a grand piano in the back of the room, which resonates quite a lot. And I've just tried to get used to the way it resonates.
That sounds like a free reverb to me.
Well, but the problem is, you know, it will be clouding my ability to hear certain things.
Look, mate, if you want to get rid of that grand piano, I'll take it.
Well, I mean, the thing about grand pianos is they're remarkably cheap because they're impossible to move.
Right.
Anyway, so normally, I mean, this it's a beautiful piano. It's like 200 quid. Bought from a house and then got the piano movers to do it for us. But yeah, so when we first founded the studio, it was very much like none of us can make a living from doing this.
What's that noise? Is that a cat?
Is that a cat?
Let him in.
Sounds like someone singing.
Carry on, Dave. We're still listening.
When we first got the studio,
so cute.
Oh no!
Poor Fluffy.
Sorry, yeah. When we first got the studio, none of us could really afford much, and we definitely couldn't see our time in the studio as like a full-time thing. Oh, flop. Sorry, I'm getting so distracted by the cat. Just take 5, everyone.
That's a standard present-day production live stream. The cat will turn up.
Hello.
He didn't show up last time.
How's his little...
Good, all healed.
Is it all healed? God, he has got a good system, isn't he?
You're a strong old boy, aren't you?
Sorry about that, Dave.
So, no, you're fine. I'm not getting cat asshole.
The acoustic end, we like to call
it. So when we first built the studio, we were trying to build it as a multi-purpose room. So it was a room that Fergus was going to do his video editing in. Jack was going to use as a kind of office space and also as a studio sometimes. I was repairing stuff in it. So it was just full of stuff.
Yep.
There were just, you know, there was like a full repair workshop at one end of it.
Amazing.
And yeah, just screens everywhere, all kinds of acoustic nightmares. And we just did the best that we could with what we had. So we built a bunch of these rock wool panels, hung them everywhere. And we've got loads and loads of them covering most of the wall space, so it's a fairly dead room. Richard from Dolby, when he came and calibrated it, he said well, I think his words were, I've calibrated far worse rooms, I wouldn't worry, or something like that, that he said. So I was pretty happy with that, given that we didn't exactly build the studio with perfect acoustics in mind.
For sure.
Because at the time that wasn't our number one priority.
It was more about being creative,
having a space to work from. But yeah, I think being in your studio and hearing how much more of a difference. Obviously, the problem is with this kind of thing is you're comparing multiple different factors. Because I'm not just comparing the treatment of the room; it's also the speakers.
Yes,
and the brilliant,
driver material, exactly, the whole lot.
Totally, and the distance even, as we discovered today. But the bottom line is it would be better if we treated our room further than we have, I think.
Interesting.
So I'm now thinking it would be hard to, there's not really any space to hang any more Rockwool panels, but I think maybe the next step would be to do something like you've done, where you build the whole wall as an acoustic panel, essentially.
Yep. Which shouldn't cost a lot of money, to be fair.
No.
You know, if you're just paying for Rockwool and fabric, you can get for like £3 a metre or so from IKEA. It shouldn't be a fortune.
And it is doable now. But I mean, I guess that's the thing about a studio is I think people often have this idea like you have to have everything perfect straight away.
Exactly,
it just gets in the way of ever doing it.
I think in a realistic world, you get your studio to a good place to work and be creative, but then it's natural that it would grow over time and it would improve in acoustics and equipment. You get new speakers, whatever it might be,
and eventually you outgrow a space as well. Like we would love to have a huge live room where we can record sort of a small string ensemble and stuff like that, but that's not really practical in the space.
So if I'm remembering this right, you've got the control room and the live room at the moment, right? You've got 2 rooms. And just run us through the live room setup. Is that a live room or is it...
It's a dead live room.
It's a dead room.
Yeah, it's a dead room,
It's a dead room.
Yeah, it's where music goes to die. It's almost a square. It's like 4 meters by 4 meters.
Right. But you can still fit a full band in there?
You can, yeah. We've done 7 people bands in there before. Gets a bit toasty, but
you can do it.
You can do it, yeah. We dropped the ceiling, but then I elected not to put plasterboard on the underside of the ceiling, so that the Rockwool ended up being just an entire acoustic panel across the board. So the ceiling is kind of almost invisible from a sort of acoustic point.
Mark's being consumed by the cat. This is just standard present day production live stream, to be fair.
Floppy didn't join last time at all.
No. How rude.
It was summer last time, wasn't it? He'd have been out murdering things.
Yeah. It's a bit of a similar story here, though, isn't it?
Mark going out murdering things?
No, that's not a similar story. We don't talk about that on the live streams because Mark, can't divulge that information publicly. Well done, James. But no, it makes me chuckle because this used to be the control room and that used to be the live room here, and now that's the de facto control room.
Yes.
And it sounds so good in there. So the purposes change over time, don't they?
Fortunately, we realised that a good live room, you want it to sound good. And to sound good, it has to be of a certain size.
Yeah, exactly.
So we were like, okay, well, that isn't of that size, so let's just make it as dead as we possibly can.
Totally. Yeah, that was we made the exact same call.
Yeah, and then add an acoustic sort of afterwards.
Yeah, and then even, I think if I did have a really, really big space, I think I'd probably want a dead room as well, ideally, because a lot of the time that's what you want.
Yeah, dead rooms are great.
Yeah.
Mikhail Mikulski in the comments said, I can hear Floppy purring on my Mum 8. Please don't stand on the end stream button.
Gosh,
he's pushing all the buttons. Oh my god.
Go, lift him off.
He's pushing all the buttons.
Well,
I don't know what he's pushed. Hold on.
Kill me.
He just flicked water all over me as well. The joys of having a cat.
Is everything still working?
Everything's still working.
Good.
We're good. So what was I saying? Yeah, so we were talking about rooms having different purposes, and rooms change. But one who said this in the comments, so Gottlieb said, this is why I feel sometimes there are writing rooms and there are mixing rooms. Having random gear in a room can really mess up calibrating a room.
Yeah.
Did you find that? So have you done any room calibration in terms of like a Trinnov or Sonar Works or?
Yeah, so KMR Audio lent us a Trinnov for a week, which was very kind of them. I think they probably assumed we might buy it at the end of it.
Right.
Which is, maybe a little bit.
Maybe you still will.
Maybe, you know what, guys? Yeah, it might still happen. Yeah. Probably won't because we're in Atmos. But anyway, so we tried that for a week and that was amazing. And then I had to go back to having no calibration. And I tried Sonar Works and hated it. And then, which I feel bad to say, but yeah, I couldn't get the system to sound good with Sonar Works at all.
Right.
And then Richard came and calibrated it, but yeah, as I say, we've got big flat desk at the back, we've got double screens, we've got a wall of synths, we've got a piano, we've got all kinds of acoustic nightmares in that room, but for the most part, I don't think it's causing me too much of an issue in the mix. But I would completely agree with that comment. Ideally, in the perfect world, you'd have both. You'd have your writing room, you'd have your mixing room. Especially because I think one of the worst things you can do when you're producing music is to get way too obsessed with the mix really early on. Because it completely...
And then you start fussing around which plugins you're using and, you know, rather than just writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And just to add to that really excellent point, for it got you?
It was.
Between having, a dead room and then a writing room. It's so true. If you try and write in a dead room, even just like not having any sunlight or a window or something,
you get
like
a bit cabin fevery, don't you?
I mean, you guys built a studio for me many moons ago, and you were insistent about retaining the window because it was going to be a dual purpose space. It was going to be a writing room and also a room for mixing. And at the time, I was very sort of like, well, why would I need the window? My God, do you need the window? You know, and it's, you know, you need to write places where you can sort of feel some kind of inspiration, and that can just come from seeing a bird fly by.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, or anything like that. Anyway, that's me off my soapbox.
But then, so that's the thing. So then, yes, because we do a lot of my work is creative. I'm sort of doing a lot of production with people, and so I guess then this maybe we don't want to treat the room anymore and make it any more dead. I mean, we don't want to get rid of the piano.
Yeah, because you want to have those things to hand. As soon as you get an idea, you can just go and play it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. And I do, and I already miss. Yeah, as I say, like the guys at Knockwood, they just got all these amazing synths, and it's so nice being able to just go use some crazy piece of equipment and get a sound that you just wouldn't get otherwise very easily.
And you brought the sun to Scotland.
Yeah.
So you've got sunlight in there as well, which is excellent.
Indeed.
I'm just I'm copying over one of the photos that you sent me of your studio over to my laptop so our viewers can see a shot.
I find it's good to have, not so much now because I don't really do any writing or anything anymore, but it's good to have an acoustic instrument very close by to hand, because I used to keep my clavinet by the side of the desk, purely because I didn't have to turn it on, because I could hear the strings enough through the case that I could just lean over and play something and go, oh yeah, that'll work.
What is it? There's something so like creatively stifling when you have an idea and for some reason you have to turn something on and
wait for it to start.
And I don't know why that is, because sometimes it can only be 10 seconds, but the difference between that and being able to turn around and just pick up a guitar or play
100%. This is a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's like everything needs to be wired in and armed and ready to go at all times. You're having to faff around with cables every time.
Exactly.
It just gets in the way of the writing process. Yeah, which was the thinking when we got our interface. We got a Red 8 Pre, which has got a ridiculous number of analog ins and outs, and the whole point of that was so that we could have everything plugged in all the time and not have to faff around with patch bass or anything like that. I still don't understand patch bass. Like I just do you need like a degree to understand?
No, I think you just need to have done it and had big consoles and tape machines and stuff like that, because you had to do it. Yeah. So because you had to do it, you sort of learnt it. It's basically just, all it's really doing is it's just repeating all the sockets in the studio in a panel. So if you want to plug the output from A into the input of B,
but you got like the half, what's it called?
The normaled,
normal half Norman, so it'll do both.
Norman?
Or
so that gets confusing. So if
it cuts one off to the other.
So a normal patch bay means if you've got two pieces of equipment, piece A and piece B, and piece A would the output of A would normally go into the input of B. So the output of a tape machine into the input of a console. Normal just means you don't have to plug a cable between them.
Oh, normal.
That's the normal.
I thought you said Norman. I was thinking Norman, play the bass.
But then when you do plug a cable in, it breaks that connection, and you can then route the other end of the cable anywhere else in the.
To be clear, I get system. I get it academically, but when I'm actually in a studio with a patch bay, it just, I don't know. There's something about. What is it? I just
it gets very confusing very quickly.
Totally,
So I'll just get a photo up of your studio now so the viewers can see. So how recent is this photo? Is this pretty much where we're at the moment?
This is what it's like right now.
I love the orange panels.
Absolutely.
Thanks. That's our brand color. I used Photoshop to remove some cable mess, and then it flagged it.
That's cheeky.
Yeah, it's cheeky. I got punished for it because it flagged it on Instagram. It's like, this has been made with AI.
Oh no!
Right, really? It over everything. I was like, all I did was move a couple of cables.
Fake studio owner. So I don't know if you've mentioned it already, but what are you running on the interface side? So I know you've got the Focusrite Red stuff, but you're also running for Atmos a different solution.
Yeah, so we're using an Audient Aurea,
Right.
which has been okay.
Okay. It's been fun. Okay.
I mean, it's an amazing piece of kit.
Yep.
And I think like when you buy a piece of hardware that's in its infancy, it's like brand new, you can expect to have some teething problems. That's
Sure.
always the way. It has been driving me a little bit crazy. It's got some glitchy problems. It desyncs, the software desyncs from the hardware quite a lot.
Right.
And I have to reboot the Aurea, or sometimes reboot the computer, or sometimes both.
And you're running Mac?
Yeah, Mac Studio.
Right.
And sometimes it lost its calibration at the back of the room for periodic times. It would just do it. It would so we have a +7 trim on the back speakers, and it would just forget about it sometimes. So they would be 7 dB quieter.
Right, which then messes up your mixes.
Yeah, then I would mix way too heavily at the back, and then send off the files to the client, and then discover it, and then, oh, sorry guys, need to redo all that. And obviously exporting Atmos files takes quite a long time.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a headache. I looked at other solutions though, and frankly there aren't really any that quite. The closest is the Avid Matrix, I think.
Yeah.
Which is substantially more expensive.
It's about double the price. It does have a lot more I/O.
Okay.
But if you're not using Pro Tools, you have to interface with it using Dante, which means that you're just using the Dante console, which is not. I'd much rather have a kind of more of a USB or a Thunderbolt interface where I can actually control it a little bit more than. So I don't know. I think hopefully the Aurea just gets better and better with time.
What's your keyboard setup? Just to get that photo back up.
We have a Prophet 12. I bought that about 12 years ago. That thing has just been one of the best things I ever bought. It's done so many. Every track I showed you earlier has got at least some Prophet on it. Underneath it is the Super 6 Udo, which is also an amazing synth. We have a Juno 6 above it, and I never touch it anymore because the Udo, for me, does everything the Juno does.
Wow.
And way more, and sounds just as good. There's probably some people who want to kill me for saying that, but that's my view.
I bought a Juno 6 for £100 in about 1987.
Right.
Just as they were going out of fashion.
What's that in today's money?
£2.60.
Probably the entire GDP of Argentina or something, isn't it?
Well, Matt, who's part of our studio, he found that Juno 6 in a skip outside his school.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that and a DX7.
What a find.
Unbelievable.
Now, the DX7 can stay in the skip.
You don't like DX7, do you? There is a place for DX7.
There is a place for DX7.
In certain
It's a skip.
songs. No. Sometimes when a DX7 is layered with like a Rhodes or something,
there is a place for
They have a place,
just cuts through, and it's just like I feel like I'm in 1989.
The DX1, that's the one you want.
And then we also have a Gen. God, I can't remember the full name of that synth, but if you go back on the image a sec, the top left of the shelf is the Gen. It's like a mono growly analog synth, and I believe that our friend picked that up from the Rockstar studios when they were shutting down.
Right.
They were moving to a new premises, and that was just nobody wanted it. So
Wow.
we took that, and we ended up with that, which was quite fun.
Wow. So loads of really good finds.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And a little Nordy as well, is there?
Oh yeah, and there's a Nord. Yeah, a naughty Nord.
So are these in use every day, or is it kind of when you have a client and you're doing a bit
Mostly,
of songwriting?
yeah. I guess that was the kind of thinking when I started downsizing with gear, was just keep the ones that are the heavy hitters. I felt like across with those synths, we kind of have most bases covered. Oh, there's also a Korg Poly 800. That's an amazing synth. Have you ever used one of them?
Yeah.
They're great, man. They're so versatile.
Yeah, they're really good.
Yeah.
They were sort of DX7 era as well, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, sort of mid-80s. Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, okay. That one's got the mark stamp of approval. But yeah, sorry. So we were saying about the building.
Yes.
So
were you involved in the whole kind of beginning of this studio?
Do you mean Music Base as a whole, the whole place? So we moved in after a couple of years. I think the first studio that started there was one called Noise Floor, and then I think we were the second studio. I think. I'm really sorry to anyone who was there before us, but I think that's right. And then since then, a bunch of studios have propped up. My friend Al runs Al's Audio Barn. We've done a bunch of stuff together. And they're all kind of dotted about the place. And there's teachers, there's people teaching drums, guitars, singing teachers. There's a repair workshop now run by my friend Campbell. And upstairs there's a community radio station called EHFM. So they're like Edinburgh's community radio station, and they've kind of taken on the cafe now. So there's just loads and loads of really interesting people coming in and all the time.
I would imagine it's busy 7 days a week.
Oh yeah, and it's 24-hour access as well.
Is it really?
So you can work there at 3 a.m. if you really want to.
Are you ever there that late?
Oh yeah,
Of course.
Of course.
Yeah,
can't step away.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing spot to be in for sure, and I think that kind of thing is starting to happen more in Edinburgh, across the board. As I say, the Knockwood guys are doing cool stuff, and there's other cool studios in Grant, and it feels like we're starting to get there in Edinburgh. Catching up, I think.
There we go.
That's a good business model as well for a studio.
Absolutely.
To have lots of like Towyard, they're doing really well. What's the one? Trevor Horn, opened in West London. Psalm Music Village. It's doing really well, and again, that's the same kind. Lots of smaller studios,
but there's just so much synergy between what everyone's doing.
That's
right?
what you want. There's loads of people there. They're all working
You can gear share. You can people share.
Yeah, we used to have a studio, my band, back in the very early 2000s in an old fire station in Greenwich, and it was fantastic. And you'd walk down.
Did you get rid of the firemen first?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, and the pole, sadly. But yeah, you'd walk down the corridor and there'd be some really loud drum and bass coming out of one room, and then you'd hear some opera singing out of another one, and then someone practicing drums in the next one. And it's just great. If you need a drummer, hang on a minute, go and walk down the corridor.
Exactly.
Not. Yeah. Could you drum on it? And all of that stuff. Yeah,
totally.
So good.
Exactly, and that was the vision for the space, and it really feels like it's finally got there. But it was really tough to get there, and you just have to take a bunch of. Ultimately, everyone's renting, so anything you do, we spent. To be fair, our studio was pretty cheap to build comparatively to a lot. I think we spent about $6,000.
Wow!
But it was about.
That's a good price.
But it was because my dad and I built the whole thing,
right? And
it took us about 6 months to build it. So, and then the studio upstairs that EHFM have built, they just had to fund the whole thing. And you're doing it ultimately in a space you don't own, based on a lease. Yeah. So it's all, there's a lot of risk involved.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Which is why, I would say, if anyone who's kind of thinking of taking on a studio, I would recommend going the route we did, which is have quite a few of you, so you can split the rent between you and just start quite chill. You don't need to get loads of amazing gear. Just get the bare essentials. Probably the number one thing to spend money on is your speakers, and I'm not just saying that because I'm at a speaker factory right now.
Speaker factory. Sounds posh.
That's a generous term.
I guess we are.
So did that whole, what is it called? Your studio complex?
The complex is called Music Base. My studio is called Lost Oscillation.
Right. Has it always been kind of owned by the same people, and it's just kind of grown that community over, or has it been reacquired over the years? Is it? Yeah,
so it's been owned by the same owner, but we never see him at all. And then there's a guy who has the lease for the whole building, and then he sublets to everyone inside, essentially. So there's just lots and lots of different people all renting off him.
But you get on well with them. You're always sharing kit round and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, everyone gets on really well. Yeah,
amazing.
Like
so Cheapo Card Company in the comments said, I've had people gear share several of my dynamic microphones in the 1990s, and I haven't seen them again.
Yeah,
that sounds about right.
We've
had a fair few of those shared as well. Over the years.
Yeah, you gradually learn over time who to lend your gear to.
Who not to. For sure.
Yeah,
don't lend out any mums.
Don't lend out your mums.
Never see them again.
I mean, it would be hard to lend those out as well. I'm terrified of those ever falling over as well, because that's the one weakness of the Velcromat, right? It tends to sort of crack.
It's pretty robust.
I mean, if you throw them down the stairs, maybe.
Yeah, and it's braced inside as well, so they'll.
Okay.
I mean, I've dropped cabinets
Yeah.
Okay.
in there when I've been building them, and obviously haven't sent them out to customers because
Is that what that's what you did with my ones, right? You sent me
that's
the,
it. Yeah, we just, yeah, we sent you the
It's
basketball
actually
version.
it's the next step of any order that I make with you. You toss them down the stairs.
Yeah,
first.
just got to
Yeah,
throw them
that's
around
it.
a bit. Yeah, they'll have cat scratches all over them and stuff like that. But yeah, it's pretty. It can be a bit brittle if it falls on something hard, but it's pretty resilient.
I think that's what I read. Yeah, so that's maybe I was overly worried about that in that case.
Yeah, they're quite resilient.
Yeah, it's quite tough.
I'll kick them around and see what happens.
Well, I dropped one when we were taking some measurements, didn't we, a few weeks ago?
Yeah, that was great fun. Just before we started
On a
taking measurements, Mark
Hard
just
oak floor.
face planted a
This
Mom
big
6 on the floor.
donk sound. It was fine.
It was fine, thankfully. But yeah, that moment of fear where you're just like, that's an expensive bit of kit.
Yeah. No.
So, what's next for you? How's the whole business going to be growing, and what's on the horizon for Dave Limited?
Well, I'm trying to get more work in Atmos where I can. Is definitely
Right.
the type of work I prefer to do when possible. The other
In
stuff
any particular genre, or
well, it's like I'm not aiming at a specific genre, but in general, the classical world seems to be the one that's adopted Atmos most enthusiastically.
Interesting.
I guess because you've got way more of a in the classical world, you already had people who would sort of be buying ultra high res CDs and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Just people who care a lot about the sound. Of
absolutely.
it. And then maybe an easier sell for something like Atmos than your everyday consumer who's listening to something like maybe more like pop or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, I'm working with some classical labels. I've been working with a label called Delphian. You just heard some of the Gabriel Jackson.
Yeah,
that's the one that
amazing.
That's the one that managed
That's the one
to
that made me cry.
make Mark's eyes wet.
The dynamic
Yeah.
range in that.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. The
always
organ
terrifying.
just suddenly
It's
gets you.
terrifying.
The organ.
Yeah.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, totally.
It's behind you.
Yeah, exactly.
It literally is.
It's literally behind you. Yeah. So yeah, with that we tried to, and that's because it's the funny thing about classical is, at the same time you're normally going for a much more naturalistic mix. So a lot of the time, most of the stuff is coming out the front anyway, because that would be your listening. You don't tend to watch an orchestra.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah.
But it's still, you still have that opportunity to try and make the space, which is just something you can't do in stereo in the same way. And I think that's what's come out really well with those recordings, is being able to kind of recreate Merton's Chapel.
Yeah.
And yeah, even things like you said, the organ is at the back of it's a very sort of long, narrow chapel, and the organ's right at the back and quite high up. So we could actually just do that in the mix, which is such a nice thing to be able to do.
Yeah. And it gets the organ out of the way of everything else.
Exactly. Yeah.
You just pull your mic towards your face a bit. Mark's been occupied by the cat.
Yeah. Nope.
You were talking earlier
Oh my
about
God.
how it was actually making mixing in stereo easier as well, and that's something that I've experienced is mixing Atmos and then mixing down to stereo, and all of a sudden you're not throwing too many plugins on or doing too much processing. It's kind of empowering you or one to leave it as a more natural sounding mix.
Totally.
Because I found that with vocals. You were talking about compression earlier and how you were like seriously compressing vocals, whereas I'm doing the complete opposite. On
Really?
vocals. That track I played you in there, no compression on the vocal whatsoever. Not a hint of it.
Well, it does depend on the voice as well.
Yeah.
But and the I guess what's going on around the vocal.
Yeah.
If it's like a piano ballad.
Yeah,
then I probably
exactly.
But then your production
That's
was
when
quite,
you would slam the compression.
yeah, exactly. But I mean, to be fair, that was a pretty busy production. You had a lot going on there. It was.
I'm a busy guy.
Well, let's try. We could try dialing up the compression. You see what you think?
No, we don't need to do that.
Okay, you don't want to.
Just waves maximizer on
But
every
it's
channel.
quite interesting,
okay.
though, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
how an idea of what something will sound like is often very different to what actually happens
Yeah.
when you do it. It's very important to have an open mind and just go with your gut and see what works.
Yeah, or you can just put one knob fatter on everything.
You can, yeah.
That's the only way to mix.
That's
One
how
knob
the pros do it.
fatter.
Yeah.
Is that one of the Greg Wells mixing things. He's got one knob things, hasn't he? Well, I hope he's got one knob, but aren't there these one knob plugins that I've seen a few years ago?
Yeah, one knob fatter
is that what it's called? One knob fatter
is one of them, and there's one knob brighter and
one knob brighter. One knob bigger is what I need. There you go. That'd be a great plugin to set out. Well, plugins don't set out, do they? But
brilliant. I'd be happy with one knob working. Age.
So there's a comment here from Got You saying, I wonder if there will ever be a loudness war in Atmos. Think about it. Some music like metal or drum and bass needs that impact, and it seems to be tricky on Atmos. Have you found that to be an issue, like mastering stereo versus mastering Atmos in order to get it to where it needs to be?
We were talking about this on the phone, weren't we, 2 weeks ago for about an hour?
Yeah.
What's your experience so far with all the Atmos stuff you've done?
So there is something, Mark, I'm interested to hear what you think about this as well, because for the most part, I would say 90% of the time I prefer the dynamic range of working in Atmos and having no mix bus compression and limiting and all that kind of thing. But there are certain genres of music, like especially something like shoegaze rock, where you got this kind of wall of sound thing, and actually limiting it quite a bit on the mix bus does seem to just do something that's really, really hard to capture in Atmos, especially when all the elements are all around the place as well. It just doesn't seem to. So, for example, there's a track that I mixed in Atmos with Stillhound, and if I put a bit of limiting on after the Atmos plugin, it sounds so much better to me than it does before, and I can't find a way of getting the same effect thing. Especially if you're working on loads and loads of objects, you can try and like slam on the same compression limiting on every single bus and every single individual object, but it's a faff, and it also somehow, I don't know if there's any science to this, but it still doesn't quite seem
it doesn't, and I think it's probably because of the psychoacoustic nature of it as well, because everything's spread out. You don't get that, it's all coming from there kind of thing either, which I think helps with the sound of the compression. I mean, I don't do a lot of sort of heavy rock or metal stuff because I'm not very good at it. So I haven't got much experience of it, but I have heard some Atmos mixes from bands that you listen to where there's been very little compression and limiting and enormous dynamic range, and it just sounds a million times better to me. But it's not what people expect, and that's the problem, I think. But I think you can take what I'd like to see is, and it's happened in a lot of other genres, what I'd like to see is genres that are traditionally crushed, people taking those genres and just opening them up and getting huge dynamic range.
It's almost like you want to get that sound at source, that kind of compressed sound.
Yeah, I mean, I always hated. I was in a funk band, so everything we released had to be like literally compressed to within an inch of its life.
Yeah, if it didn't have Kramer pie on it, it wasn't going out.
And I just hate the sound of that.
I guess there's a question of like how much is what we expect these mixes to sound like a sort of social construct that's occurred through just hearing it that way for so long.
And it's about authenticity as well. So if there's a funk mix that doesn't sound like shit, that sound like it was recorded on a mono tape 100 years ago with 2 dB of dynamic range, then it's not authentic. Whereas, and I've noticed in that genre now, there's a lot more the people I can never remember the name of being one of them, the void funk thing, where
Nick Campbell Destroyed.
Where that's got huge dynamic range and it's spread out,
and it also works in stereo. as well.
And you can hear every single transient of every single drum hit, and there's a synth that goes up and down like nobody's business, and it just sounds amazing. Whereas if that was crushed and put through Kramer pie, and all the things we had to do to the thing, it just kills it.
So are you folding down to stereo for mixes, or are you kind of we both use Logic, don't we, predominantly? Because there's also a way to there's also a way to convert the mix from Atmos into stereo as well, and that's what I've started doing. And I'm still finding that I'm not then adding anything to the other, but it gives me a bit more control over. You've got to be a bit more careful with reverbs in stereo in particular, because you can get away with a lot more in Atmos than you can in stereo, because obviously it takes up this much narrower space, isn't it? So a reverb's going to take up more space
for sure.
But are you literally just folding down to stereo? From your Atmos
Yeah,
mixes,
so the
or-
problem I find is that I always want to make changes, and so if I get to a point where I split a mix into two, and I've now got two projects, the stereo one and the Atmos one,
Yeah.
then it's really annoying if you decide you want the acoustic guitar up by 3dB,
Yeah.
and then you quickly lose track of what you've done in one and what you've done in others, and so I like to just work in one project. I work in Atmos.
Yeah.
Fold it down stereo within the project. Occasionally, this is actually, so like the latest Logic update seems to have fixed a lot of big gripes I had. One of the problems I had was that objects would sometimes just do weird things. They'd desync, or they'd sort of make weird pops and strange sounds, and that would even happen in the stereo fold down. So then I started occasionally exporting an ADM file and then importing that ADM and then making my stereo mix using that ADM, which seemed to work a lot better in terms of getting past the glitches. But one thing that's really nice is in the newest version of Logic, they've changed it so that when you change the format of the master in Atmos to stereo, it actually changes the channel to a stereo channel.
Yeah.
Whereas before it stayed as a surround channel and you just got two lines going up for your stereo mix within the surround channel, which meant that any plugins you put on would be in surround format.
Oh, okay, because I haven't done the update, and there was a way to do that in the previous one, but you had to go through a few different processes. But you're saying now in the new update that it literally just
You
gives
just do it in the Atmos plugin. If you just
take it off, and
you
then
just
it's-
click 2.0 and the whole channel changes format to a stereo format.
so you could almost then master your Atmos
Exactly.
mix in stereo.
Exactly. And then so what I've been doing, and this is, so I'd love also to get your thoughts on this. I remember all the time I heard when I was learning how to mix, like, you should never master within your project. You should export your mix and then start a new mastering project and do the mastering as a completely separate process. But I find that in mastering, I often hear issues in the mix,
And you want to change it.
and I want to fix it. So I find that doing it all within the wrong one project can be really helpful in terms of that. So I'll often master at the end of each mix, and then if it's going to a different mastering engineer, just turn off the mastering at the very end.
Right.
And send it off. That
I
works, I find.
completely agree with that. I was exactly the same as you. It was like project master in a different project completely, but now I've recently started
Just doing it all.
doing it all in the same, and it does actually throw up issues in the mix as well, because you can anticipate, for example, well, okay, so this is going to be limited, so all of a sudden it's going to sound a bit different, and you can sort of tweak for those things and make not approximations, but like you've got a better judgment.
Totally, yeah, and especially if you're working. I still work with a lot of people who want really loud masters. And if you can hear sort of where your mix is starting to get really hairy when you sort of bring up the gain too much in the adaptive limiter, you can quickly turn that off and fix that in the mix and then try again. It seems to work well. You okay?
Yeah, it's just a bit of tea went down the wrong hole.
Oh no.
I think doing that is... So last week we were talking about mastering and comparing it to colour grading video. It's no good doing the colour grading if you haven't got your lighting right. And I think having the having the mastering process on in the project is the same as having a video monitor that's got a colour grading LUT on it when you're setting your lights up. You can see what the final result will be like. And I think probably most of the material I've worked on over the years that's been digitally, that's been both recorded and mixed and mastered, it's all in the same thing.
Right. Okay.
Because like you say, mastering something can I just need to, that sounds great, but if only that shaker was 2 dB louder, and then instead of having to go back to the project, you just turn it up 2 dB.
Well, that seems to correlate with the audience, with what they're saying. So Peter Samuelson said thumbs up for mastering in the mix project. Richter Scale said, yep, started that as well. Makes more sense to fix issues in the same.
I mean, lots of people say, you shouldn't do that. It should be a completely different process, but it doesn't matter, does it?
It's that kind of traditional ritual, isn't it?
Yeah,
Where
it's
like,
going
I mixed
through
it now, I
the-
send it to the mastering engineer, but now as we talked about last week, we're entering an era where, a lot of people are mixing and mastering
And
their projects.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's also something to take into account where computers are more powerful. So as we've just had in the comments from Gotya, computers are able to handle that now. If we go back even like 10 years ago when I started working with you could not master your
that's
thing
true.
on a Mac Pro or whatever
It's 100%.
in the same project. Like it just wasn't a thing.
That's probably part of the reason why I never tried it.
Yeah.
Because it
The
was
computer
went
would-
to a hole.
The computer would just shit itself.
I think the first time I saw that was when we were doing the mix stuff on I Can't Stop, and you pulled up the project and stuck your mastering chain
And it went,
at the first thing at the beginning. I was like, you can do that? And you're like, yeah, why not? And it's like, oh shit, this sounds amazing, cool. And it was actually easier.
yeah.
So it's more than one way to skin a.
Don't skin
Exactly.
floppy.
And again, there's always a debate about top-down mixing. So starting with your master bus processing and then... and that doesn't work for me, and it never has. But it works for lots of people. So if that works for you, then do it.
You can do kind of like a half top down. You can sort of broadly, you can have sort of.
Oh, you're talking about mastering? Sorry, I thought you were talking about your OnlyFans.
Yeah, I don't have any trousers on.
Yeah, no, it's the BBC.
Oh, wow.
The BBC Newsreader Classic.
Remember the one knob I was talking about?
Yeah, that's where it is. It's now clearly visible. One knob stiffer. That's a new. That's a new one. I haven't seen that
Just
before.
going to move this way. Oh no, then I get closer to you. Damn, I'm stuck
Yeah.
What were we
between
talking
two
about?
ferns.
Yeah, do you want
top
cat
down mixing.
asshole or knob?
Oh, the cat's fine.
He's all right.
Anyway, on that note,
just make sure he doesn't think it's a mouse, because that could end badly.
On that sticky subject.
was there anything else anyone can think of covering? Or have we...
Only
There's a
his
million
knob.
things we could be.
No.
We could be here all night. We've got to get a plane.
Yes. So, on that note, we'll call it a night. Thank you, Dave, for travelling all the way down to gloomy Essex to come and see us in our studio. We really appreciate you making the trip. I know you didn't come down just for us, but it makes us feel special.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming down. Much appreciated. Thanks for your time.
And congratulations on the upward trajectory. It's you've blown me away today. It's so spectacular, and I'm really happy. And
Absolutely.
you're just nailing it. Absolutely nailing it.
Well, thank you guys so much for all your support over the last couple of years. You're amazing
You
speakers.
are
Your
very
very
welcome.
kind words today, and for being great friends.
You're very welcome. If you would like to promote yourself, say what you do, where you're from, all that fun stuff, feel free.
I'm Dave Oscillation. I'm from Scotland. I run a studio called Lost Oscillation, and I'm in a band called Slow Karma and another band called Stillhound.
Loads of fun. And what we'll do is on our Discord, if you hop on there, I'll post all the links to your online stuff and people can check you out. So yeah, make sure to hop on there and we'll share some links. So thank you everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and you will see us next time. It's not that camera mark, I'm looking at my one, but
Oh, okay. We'll look at this one in a minute.
we'll look at that one. There we go. Stick your face in the lens. That is absolutely beautiful. On that note, good night everybody. Thank you very much.